Welcome to Real Estate Hot Wired. Maggie Rose March will be your host today. She is an informed voice for the novice investor, a voice of reason for the seasoned investor. And we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Maggie Rose. Welcome back to this week's show where we're talking about dispelling some of the myths regarding the difficulties of finding money to invest in real estate. Our guest today is Robert Parker with Flip It Funding. Welcome, Robert. I've been looking forward to your visit with us today on Real Estate Hot Wired, and I want to take a minute to introduce you to our audience. Today's guest is Robert Parker, the managing partner of Flip It Funding, LLC. Flip It Funding is a private hard money lender based in Sarasota, Florida, that loans money to fix and flip investors in Florida and Connecticut, as well as investors that need bridge financing for buy and hold income properties. Robert has been successfully buying, fixing, and selling real estate since 2000 and has been providing private lending for over 8 years. He's extremely passionate about real estate, loves helping his borrowers build wealth, and is here to share some of his knowledge. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Maggie Rose. I'm excited to be here. First time ever in the studio.
Well, welcome. So, I'm sorry. So, I know that we originally were talking about just about finding the money and that it wasn't as difficult as people thought. But then I found out you are and were an investor yourself, and that there's a whole history on you that goes with that. And I thought it might be wonderful to hear your story, and that would be inspirational to the novice investor.
Sure. Yeah. No. My story kind of starts off 20 years ago. As you said in the intro, I bought my first property back in 2000. I'd moved back from L.A. to Connecticut. Needed to get away from the noise and the traffic out there and see some green. Mm-hmm. I came back. I didn't want to live with my parents, and so I happened to be looking around in I guess what your audience would probably know as a penny saver. I saw that there was a condo for sale in a really charming building the next town over. And that building was built in 1864. It was actually an old hotel that had been converted in the 70s into apartments in 80s in the condos, to condos in the 80s, sorry. And I called up the owner, and we met, toured the property, and actually that afternoon we got together at a coffee shop and wrote up on just a one-page piece of paper an intent to execute a contract, and sure enough, we closed a month later, and that was my first property. That was the easy part of it. I had never purchased a piece of real estate before, and the reason I was so attracted to it was the charm in the building. I walked in, it had exposed brick, it had 10-foot ceilings, 8-foot windows, and trim that was a foot wide on the side. It just a beautiful canvas. And now, being the professional HGTV watcher that I was for years, I knew what I wanted to do with the place. I got some tools together, and I started busting out a wall that I wanted to move, and I missed the water main feeding the third and fourth floor by about an inch, and I knew that I needed to call in some.
Lucky.
It was. I didn't know anything about load-bearing walls, but I quickly learned, and I knew that I needed some help, and so I called in some help, and I worked alongside him for the next 4 months, learning a lot of stuff. My first time out. So really got kind of in the field, hands-on experience as I was doing it. And after 4 to 5 months, I had a place that I was happy and proud to own. And that was kind of my first piece of real estate. And I hadn't thought of, this wasn't an investment for me in the beginning. This was just simply a place to live and be excited about. Where I became an investor was 3 years later. I decided to put that unit on the market. And I'd purchased the property for $62,000, put about $18,000 into it, and the market was going up, and sold it 2.5 years later for $120,000. And that was exciting to me. That was $30,000 in profit that I had made on the place. And that was, I was 26 years old, or maybe 28 by the time I sold it. So that was a good chunk of change. But the best was still to come. What I didn't know was about Internal Revenue Code Section 121. And I know we've talked a little bit about this before, and this was kind of an exciting thing that I wanted to share with your listeners because your tagline for the show is an informed voice for the novice investor. And, we've got a lot of experienced investors out there that would know about Section 121, but for anybody coming in, to the game in the last few years, they may not have heard of that. And what that is it allows you to make, in this case, I made the $30,000. It was completely tax-free. If you live in a property as your primary residence for 2 out of the last 5 years, you're able to take the entire gain up to $250,000 for singles and $500,000 for joint tax return filers without paying any tax on it. And that, to me, was just wonderful. And that was kind of the first tool in my real estate box. And I said, well, geez, if I did that on a little condo, could I do that on a big house? Could I do that on another condo? Could I keep doing that every 2 years? And, I was a single guy in my late 20s, and that's when I caught the real estate bug.
At that time, were you thinking about it in terms of that this was going to be free living, or were you really just thinking about that's $30,000 and nobody took anything away from it?
Well, the icing on the cake was essentially, hey, I just lived for 3 years or 2.5 years, with the money that I made back. If you kind of want to look at it like that, I've lived for free. And I've went, and in the time since, I've used Section 121 on 4 other properties, and I'm about to use it on a 5th property that I'm living in currently in Florida. So it's an incredible tool to an investor as you're looking to build your wealth, to shelter any of the tax gains on a property. So I think
sheltering the tax gain is a tool that's really, really important, and that the novice investor, which is Mr. and Mrs. Homebuyer, and I know you said when you made this purchase, you weren't thinking about it in terms of that you were a first-time home buyer. You weren't thinking about it as an investment. You were really just looking for a place to live. But most people in America do think about their first home as being the largest investment they ever make, and yet they don't know about these rules or the wealth that they can gain just from something as simple as buying carefully, buying something that maybe they can improve, put some sweat equity into it, and end up with a gain at the other end of it, which is exactly what you did and are still doing. And now this is 5 houses later, how many years later, you've actually been able to live basically rent-free?
Yeah, the all the houses. So the first condo, I can say I only made $30,000. I kind of understood and then used that rule and realized, well, hey, maybe ways to shelter more money was if I go and build houses. And so I immediately went from just having my first condo, being a property owner for 2 years, into kind of the task of going and building, getting a piece of property through planning and zoning, doing the engineering on the piece of property, and working with a builder to build a house, moved in it, lived in it for 2 years, did the exact same thing. This time I sheltered over $100,000. And so, yeah, looking back at it, if you do the calculation, I mean, the taxes up in Connecticut on that piece of property were expensive, but if I was paying, I think I was paying $8,000 or $9,000 a year in taxes, maybe a few $1,000s in utilities. But if you look at the gain over the period of time that I was living in the property, that pays me to go essentially live for free for years. So yeah, kept doing it. I kind of wanted to bring this example to your show today and share with your listeners, because for those who are, there's a lot of advertising out there. There's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of stuff that you see on Facebook, Instagram, on TV shows about flipping, making money, all these big names that are out there in terms of offering education. And sometimes they want to sell you a system. They want to tell you there's this way to do something. But there's 1,000 ways to make money in real estate. You can flip properties, you can buy and hold, you can do commercial real estate, you can do syndication, you can do hard money lending, which I ultimately got into, that we're going to be talking about, I think, in the next couple weeks with your listeners. So many ways to make money in real estate. And for somebody who wants to get started, but I know your shows for this month are going to be focused around kind of dispelling the myths of gaining access to capital. But if an investor wants to get started, why not get started with your first house? It's going to be cheaper capital. So you can go out there, if you're a first-time home buyer, go get the FHA loan for 3.5%, with 3.5% down, at an interest rate that's going to be a fraction of what private money or hard money is. You're taking a lot of the risk out of it. It gives you an opportunity to see if real estate investment if you're cut out for it. If you're going to learn to work on a house, maybe it's too much for you. Maybe you don't want to swing a hammer and work with contractors and try to manage contractors to redo bathrooms, kitchens, roofs, flooring, or maybe you'll love it. I love it. I've worked in finance pretty much my whole life, and at the end of the day, I get a lot of pleasure out of swinging a hammer, doing some demo, installing some cabinets, painting, and it can be relaxing and therapeutic. And so for me, it was a great fit. I found it early on, real estate investing, mixed with kind of my financial background. I said, hey, I think we're all out there. Anybody who's a real estate investor is investing to, either park their money and make a return on it, or to generate, wealth for themselves or their families, to be able to do what they want in life. And it's
I'd
a
love
great
to
tool.
add something to that. I don't want to take away from that enthusiasm you have, but I want to add something to that, because I think it's really important. If the first-time home buyer isn't thinking about himself or herself as an investor, or the property as an investment, it's kind of a mistake. You really need to look at that very first purchase because we know statistically that when asked, most Americans really do think that that's the largest investment that they make, is their first home, and that's where they're probably going to get the money for their children to go to college from. And this, or that's where they're going to expand their life from, or they're going to sell that and move up into a better home. But they recognize that it's an investment, but they don't approach it as an investor would, and they don't look for the things that they need to look for to make sure that it's a solid investment. I hope that's adding to what you're saying and not pulling away.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I looked at it as an investment. In fact, I have moved, I've been telling everybody for the last few years that I've moved 13 times in 20 years. And then I made a list last night because I knew I was going to be on the show today with you. And I realized I've moved 17 times in the last 24 years. And, I bought and sold. I'm not a huge investor. I'm kind of I think an average investor over 20 years in terms of, this hasn't been my full-time interest, but I love it because there's a great paycheck at the end of each deal, usually for me. I bought and sold 10 condos, 6 houses. I built 2 of those and 6 pieces of land. And in each one of those, a lot of times I may just go live in the property for a year. And even just living in a property for a year, maybe you don't get the entire tax-free deduction that we just talked about a little bit, the Section 121. But if you live in it for 12 months and a day, you're going to get a long-term, it's going to be taxed at the long-term capital gain rate. So, that's a benefit. And plus, if you've got a place to live in, it's not risky as if you're paying rent or you're paying a mortgage on an existing house and you want to go either flip a property. A lot of people want to flip today. A lot of people want to do some long-term buy and holds and build their rental portfolio. But I think it takes a lot of the risk out of it if you look at it and kind of learn on your own personal residence. But yeah, absolutely, it is the largest investment most Americans will make in their life. Unless you're the upper 1%, which we all maybe or many of us aspire to be, but that's what's so great about real estate, and I think that's why everybody's so excited about real estate today. Is that real estate, you can have a college education and fail in real estate and you cannot have finished high school. And I've seen, some of our borrowers are out there and they've got the